Hello, and welcome to Two Brain Cells Left. This is our new YouTube adventure where we're going to talk about cool and interesting things, to us anyway, from around the world. We'll try to have some fun. We want to hear your thoughts about what we chat about, so let's begin. My name is Alan. I'm a graphic artist, mostly working digitally, and with me,
Hi, and this is Jack. I'm a retired military intelligence officer from the United States Army, and we're glad that you've joined us today.
this week on Two Brain Cells Left, we have some questions that I think are fairly common among a lot of people, at least in the United States and certainly in the world, about international trade. The question that I have that I'm going to pose to Jack, who has done a lot of research on this, we'll start out with what exactly does trade between nations really involve? Because I think it's more complex or it's simpler than any of us really imagine. Jack, what do you think?
Okay, well, there's really two kinds of trade that happen between nations. The one that seems to be the one that people think of when we think international trade is trade directly between governments. We think that the government controls all the trade that goes through. And in general, this is military equipment, technology sharing, anything that would be controlled by the government itself. Data concerning specific government specific things. That said, the vast majority of trade between nations is actually corporate trade, just like it is within the US between two corporations. It just with an entity on the outside in which international laws and then the laws of the two nations apply to them. However, the deals are not brokered through the government, they are brokered directly from company to company. Give a quick example. The United States doesn't produce aluminum the way it used to many, many years ago. So, U.S. car companies making car bodies out of aluminum will purchase the aluminum directly from a supplier outside the United States in its raw form or whatever sheet form or whatever it is that they're buying. Import that aluminum in to then create the bodies of the vehicles here. There's thousands and thousands of examples going both directions of buying raw materials but you're not buying them from the other government. The governments aren't involved other than just oversight with law. It's direct company to company trade. That's really the two types, and it's much more basic than most people think. If example could be, Alan, if say you lived in Canada and you had a company and I live here in the US and you have materials I need, I would go directly to you and purchase them, just adhering to the laws of both nations and international trade laws. But payment doesn't go through the government, payment goes from me directly to you. So that's pretty much how international trade works. It's very, very simple. It's not really that different than just buying anything from somebody at the corner store. I mean, to put it very simply.
It also scales down, doesn't it, to even little, almost mom and pop shop size companies?
Oh, it
If
definitely
someone produces something.
It definitely does. If you go online and you buy something from Amazon and the supplier of that particular item is not a US company, Amazon only handles the transaction for you because that's what Amazon does. It's a central transaction and shipment hub. That's what Amazon does. So they receive your payment when you pay for it. They pay for the item directly to that provider who then ships it directly to you through either Amazon's internal delivery system, which the vast majority of things are, or if it's something that can be mailed, they will directly mail it. So you can be one object from a private person who's buying it for personal use, or it could be giant corporations. But yeah, it goes all the way down, and that's still considered international trade. And when trade calculations are done, those little transactions, even the $20 ones are all included.
All right. So, what is the controversy about international trade right now? What is the issue that is most on people's minds and in people's wallets today about international trade?
Well, there's two things. The simpler one is we hear a lot, particularly in the US, about trade deficit, as in we import more dollars worth of goods than we export to other countries. This is not as big a deal as it sounds. Just because we buy a lot of things from other people doesn't mean that we're suddenly having less money because our money is flowing out. Those goods are brought in. Most of them are brought in to retailers that are then sold to us that for their markups. So we're buying these things because oftentimes buying the products internationally is cheaper for a lot of reasons, i.e., labor costs and all those things. And other times it's just things that aren't created in the US to sell us. Things like microchips are just, we just don't make them here. So that kind of stuff is always imported and always imported. And the United States is a huge consumer side. We buy more products than most anybody else in the world. Our economy is the largest in the world. So trade deficit, we would like to sell more things. That's on the individual businesses. If they're deciding to sell what they build or the service that they provide in the United States only, or the vast majority of their customers are US, we're going to end up with a trade deficit. And we having a more robust economy with more people having more money, it's naturally going to be that we're going to buy the end products more so than selling the raw materials. That's just the evolution of the technology in the United States, the where the United States has developed to. We are a consumer nation versus a production nation. Now, we do still produce a lot of things, granted. We just also consume a lot of what we make here in the US internally versus selling it internationally. So, again, another reason that we will have a trade deficit. There is another subtle thing there is that the United States, we pay higher prices for most things. That's just the nature of being a wealthy nation. So if I make widget A and I can sell it in the United States and get $20 for it, but if I want to sell it outside the United States and the rate for something similar in that location is $15, and I have to pay for the shipping, I have to pay any taxing that goes on for U.S. taxes on exports, which we do have a tax on exports. It reduces the profit margin, so it's not in my best interest to sell overseas. Now, if I could sell it in the $20 in the United States, but overseas it sells for $50 while paying the tax and the shipping, that it's a no-brainer because I'm going to make more money. But as a rule, we are a wealthier nation. We will pay higher prices for well-made goods. We sell them here. So that is another reason that we don't sell U.S. goods outside the United States as much as other nations do because they're higher quality in often cases and they earn higher profits for the companies being sold domestically.
I see. Okay. Cool. So, for us, for example, if I'm going to be US centric about this, made in America doesn't necessarily guarantee us more profits. It does something for jobs, but it doesn't do as much for the markets themselves. All right.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Made in America comes with a quality hallmark, so that other countries want to buy U.S. goods, and often people come to the U.S. just to buy U.S. goods. They buy them here and take them home, and that doesn't show up in international trade numbers, which does happen. It's not a huge number, but it does happen as well. So there are a lot of nuances to this.
So let's talk about the loaded question of the day, tariffs. Tell me about tariffs. What are they actually? Because there's a lot of confusion around how they actually work. And what were they designed to do initially?
Okay, well, tariffs are a tax imposed by the government on an imported good. So I'll use wheat. Wheat comes in, it is sold by another country for X price. It arrives in the US. The United States steps in, says, okay, buyer here in the United States, you negotiated X price for this good, you pay them that. Now you have to pay us whatever percentage the tariff is, 25%, 35%, 50%. So if the wheat costs $100, you pay the seller their $100, they're happy, they go away. The wheat is now sitting here on the dock, and you pay the government the $25 to release it to you, which is the tariff tax. That tariff money goes to the US government. It was originally designed to protect US producers from being undercut by foreign producers of the same object for the US market. Now, all countries have tariffs, and all countries do them basically, or did them basically, for the same reason, to bring equal footing for the same thing, in this case wheat. US grown wheat would cost, because it costs more to grow it here because labor costs are higher, at that tariff brought the price of the foreign wheat up to parity. So there was no benefit of buying foreign wheat because you had to pay a tax that then made the US cost wheat essentially equivalent or less because you're not paying for shipping and other things. So that was what tariffs 200 years ago and further back for, outside the US were designed to do. What has happened is that over time, nations don't produce everything that they consume. A natural affinity towards certain things happen. Like some resources are only available in certain places. Rare minerals only occur where rare minerals are. But the United States has a huge area where farming is very, very good. And most nations don't have that. So they have to import US or other nations that have similar type of growing capacity. And that said, they would put tariffs on us to make what they do create internally, at least that gets bought first, then they buy everything else. And that's to protect local economy. Because if you mass produce something, it gets cheaper. So the small growers in country X of their wheat, they get bought first because the taxes on buying US stuff to their own governments, because the US sellers don't pay it, makes it a little bit more expensive than buying the local. And then once the local is gone, then they go and buy all the imports. And that still happens today with smaller nations that protect their own internal economies and protect their own industries, even if they are small. So it's a tax. It's a tax by the government on an import, whatever that import is. But that tax is not paid for by the seller. That tax is not paid for by the government of the country that originated. That tax is paid for by the first person who touches that import. So now instead of paying $100 for that wheat, they have now paid $125 for that wheat. So now they need to make their money. They're going to not just eat that $25 cost. They take the wheat and say that wheat was durum wheat and it was destined to become pasta. So they take that wheat and they sell it to the pasta production people, who then are now paying whatever, the $125 plus whatever markup that importer charges. I'm making up a number. So now they've paid $150 for all that wheat to create their pasta with. They are not going to eat that $25 tariff and sell that now completed pasta on. They're going to pass that cost to the consumer, the end buyer of their pasta. So now we will have a 25% increase plus whatever little markups, and scarcity drives inflation. So in the end, a tariff falls on the lap directly of the end user of whatever it is being bought. In this case, it was a processed item from wheat to pasta. But if it's an entire item, say a medical device or a television or whatever it is, that gets passed on to the consumer. And that's how the tax works. So it gets paid up front to the government. The government collects its money from the very first person that touches it. And then that cost just trickles down because nobody's going to eat the tax on something that they're passing on. Always the end user ends up eating the taxes. This is true with U.S. sales tax. Technically, a U.S. sales tax is not a tax on what you buy. It is a transaction tax on a merchant. The merchant gets taxed per transaction by the government. The merchant is the one on the hook for that money. Well, they don't want to do that, so they add whatever the sales tax is to the purchase. And that's why in the United States, you have sales tax, you see the price of it, and then you add sales tax on top of it. Whereas if you would say in the UK, they have something called a value added tax. Value added tax is a completely different thing. Value added tax is exactly what it says. We are going to add X value to the cost of that item. The tax is on the item. So now that item that used to cost $100 costs $110. And that tax gets paid for automatically by the last person that buys the item. Functionally, it ends up being the same thing. The consumer pays the tax, but the tax, a value added tax, is a tax on the item itself, whereas a sales tax is a merchant tax that they then decide that they don't want to pay, so they make the consumer pay it. So that's why they collect the taxes, and you don't file a sales tax with all your receipt at the end of the year to pay the government. They do that. But you give them you pay the taxes. You're basically paying the taxes for them. They collect it, they send it to the government. So that's how a tariff works. A tariff is basically a sales tax in a very, very broad stroke. It is a sales tax on the transaction of a specific noted item being imported from whatever nation or nations have a tariff levied against them. And they're not universal. If you put tariff on steel against Chinese steel, you can still buy Argentinian steel with no tariff. Tariffs are directed, it is a political thing specifically targeting specific nations. Now, it can be obviously put unilaterally. All steel is going to have this on it. But as a rule, it is a one-on-one, basically a economic treaty of sorts.
Recently, tariffs have been used by certain individuals, countries, whatever, as a punishment for other nations that said government does not actually like or wants to be a bit punitive about. Are tariffs useful as a punishment tool?
They once were, when the United States was the one place buying everything. We still buy huge quantities of goods. But the people who are punished the most by tariffs in modern globalized economy, in the case of a tariff set by the United States government against foreign trade, is the U.S. consumer. And I'll give you a very good example. Under the North American Free Trade Agreement, auto parts, which used to be made in Taiwan and in China almost exclusively, those companies started moving their production facilities to Mexico. Yes, it costs more to produce them in Mexico, but there is no cross-Pacific shipping. There was no docking fees because NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, allowed free trade. So whatever was made in Mexico could come into the US and be sold with no repercussions. Nothing hinky was about it. So major sectors of products that were needed in the United States started being made in Mexico. And now we have tariffs against Mexico. And you go and you try and find auto parts right now, if you can find them, they're dramatically more expensive, more than the tariffs, because scarcity also increases. If 10 people need my widget and I've only got two, and it used to sell for $100, but now there's a tariff on it, so it's $150, but I still only have two, and those 10 people need this, I'm going to sell it for $500. And guess what? They're going to pay it if they need it. And that's what's happening to our economy right now. Tariffs are not only are US citizens paying the markup on the tariffs for whatever these things are, because it ends in our lap at the end of the day. We're paying a scarcity tax, which is not really a tax, of course, but it's an artificially inflated price based on scarcity. If it's rare, it's more expensive. And so that is why everything hurts, and that's why everything feels expensive right now. Tariffs in a modern economy, a nation like the United States is now buying less objects from anywhere, including internal US, because we have less money. US sellers are not getting the raw materials they need to make full runs of everything because the raw materials don't exist in the United States, at least not on the scales that they need. So all in all, it's just hurting us. And where the US economy goes, the world economy follows. That is just the nature of the beast.
Interesting. To summarize, list for me, if you can, the dangers of rampant overuse of tariffs.
Well, the most obvious one is that the sellers of whatever it is get fed up with it and they just say, you know what? Yeah, we make less money selling it to somebody else, but we're just going to sell it all to them. So we no longer have availability. That is a huge problem. If we no longer can get the resources that we need to produce, and this is not governments, this is Jim Bob's whatever company that needs that widget that is made in Thailand, he can't get it anymore. It's not produced in the United States. He's out of business. That's it. So that's a big one. Larger companies are less beholden to this, but small companies are hugely beholden to this. And in an America First mindset, killing the small business does not help anybody. Consolidation of wealth and all those other problems. So tariffs are nothing more than it's a money grab with a political swing to it. There is almost no downside to U.S. tariffs when the stuff that's being produced can be sold somewhere else. Maybe it's for less. Yes, it does hit the bottom line of the seller, but now it's just not available. So that's the first one. The second one makes the economy of the nation inside the tariff, the receiving side, really unstable and increases cost. Period. There is no other way around it, especially on goods that are not directly being a direct competition with a U.S. product. If the United States made TVs that were great, which we don't really, and the TVs that we're importing were tariffed to make parity in price, then it works. We don't make TVs. The TVs coming in have a tariff. We have no choice. We need a TV. We have to buy an expensive TV. And we have to pay the huge tax on it because there is no other option. And things like auto parts, that is 100% the case. The things like power tools, that is 100% the case. Things like computer components, that is 100% the case. There are no American options to go and buy an NVIDIA card. They're not made in the United States. So they're getting tariffed. So we want one, we have to pay for it. And that's a tax on the U.S. people. That is not a tax on a foreign country. So tariffs are, in globalized economy, a tax on its own population, unless it is a direct competitive protection, which none of the tariffs that we are seeing right now are doing that. They're just taxes.
Wild. Wild. I saw something about soybean farmers not terribly happy with what's going on because they have seen their own revenue drop by about 20% to 25% at least, as soybeans, which we largely sell to China, we tariffed the heck out of China, and so China is now buying their soybeans elsewhere, and the farmers here are taking the hit for that.
Yeah, we because as soon as we put the tariff on products coming in, they put tariffs on the products coming in on that side. Made American soybeans too expensive. So now they're going to go buy them somewhere else. That's just how tariffs work. The problem is that the things that we tariffed, there's not a lot of sources for the things that we tariffed. We were buying them from one or two places, and the way these tariffs have laid out is we're kind of stuck holding the bag. And industries like agriculture, which are big, our biggest exports from the US are agriculture. Biggest ones. We sell agriculture produce to the world because we have a breadbasket for a center of this country. And when we tariff, the very first thing the other nation does is put tariffs right back. So now, not only things more expensive for those farmers to buy the TV, like I mentioned, they're selling less of their stuff because they produce more than is needed by the US markets because they were selling them internationally. They were filling a void for the international market. So, in a way, these
Yeah.
tariffs actually hurt the US economy more drastically than just the taxes and making everybody who's not a millionaire feel poor. But that's what tariffs do. They are just a sales tax. Just a sales tax. And they don't serve any purpose in modern global economy except when you are protecting direct competition. They still have a use. I grow wheat in the United States. It costs me $10,000 to grow it per acre to get whatever the yield is. China has wheat that's not as good, but they can do it for $4,000 per acre because labor is cheaper, land is cheaper, fertilizer is cheaper, and then they want to bring it to the market and sell it at half price. Well, then putting a 100% tariff on that wheat to make it the same price as buying American wheat, that's what tariffs were designed to do. That's not what these ones are doing.
That's a good place to stop. We have dove into this topic deeper than I thought we would, and there is even more depth to it. But the it turns out the concept of it is fairly simple and not what I actually expected. Jack, thank you for all your expertise and work on this. Everyone out there, we love you guys. Please subscribe, like, and we will see you real soon.
Thanks, everyone.